Okay. Wow, there are a lot of rainbows, and I'm wondering if I accidentally clicked something to make this so rainbowy. Really odd. I don't know if that's... Oh, there it is. Okay, I accidentally did click rainbows on. Okay, I'm going live just a little bit early because last time Zoom didn't want to work, so I put a link up on the Zoom page for people to access this in the Facebook group. And I am just going to try to make sure that I'm sharing the right thing. Welcome everybody to the second part of the Difficult Clients training. Zoom did not want to cooperate last time, so I'm going to leave Zoom up for like a second. This is so odd. Hopefully it's going to work here. But welcome everybody to the second part of dealing with difficult clients, how to deal with scope creep. I'm doing this in the Facebook group, but it was also going through Zoom, so I didn't trust it last time because the audio didn't work in Zoom. So I'm going to continue testing that and figuring that out. But in the meantime, I've just kind of left a screen up there while I get into some of the content. So last week we talked about clients who were vague, which can be so frustrating because you just don't have the information that you need to do the job or to get feedback. Now, today I want to talk about another type of difficult clients, and it's one that almost everyone has had some kind of experience with, and that's the scope creeper. Some people who are new to freelance are like, well, what the heck is scope creeping? Essentially, when you agree to do something with a client and then you're in the contract, or even sometimes newer freelancers might forget the contract, but you kind of have a verbal agreement that you're going to do something particular. Hold on one second. I'm just going to leave that the way it is. Oh no, I did the wrong thing there. So some people who are new to freelancing might not even have, why is Zoom being so difficult today? I think I'm just going to leave it the way that it is, and we'll just do that. Okay. So when you're newer to freelancing and you don't have a contract, but maybe you have a verbal agreement with somebody, or if you do have a contract and they start kind of pushing against it and trying to have you do more and more and more, that's scope creep. So you've come to an agreement with the client. You say, I'm going to do these 4 things, or I'm going to work for 5 hours. And then they start asking for extra stuff that goes above and beyond it. Some clients are, hey, Amy, some clients do it on purpose. Some clients don't realize that it's not okay to ask for additional work for free. I don't think it's okay to ask for additional work, period, because what if you don't want to do it? Like there have been times when I've been working with clients where they've asked me to do things that were outside the scope. And 1, they didn't want to pay, but 2, it was things I didn't even do. They wanted me to graphic design a custom PowerPoint deck, and I'm like, listen, I don't even make my own PowerPoint slides when I do presentations. Someone on my team helps me with that, and my graphic designer makes the template, so it's not my area of expertise, and I never agreed to do it. So when a client starts pushing on those boundaries and wants you to be doing more things than you agreed to do, it can put you in a really awkward position. And this happens a lot on big contracts, so where the client's already paying you a decent amount. And it happens a lot for newer freelancers because they're so excited to just have the client that they're like, okay, what do I do from here? I don't want to lose this client. I don't want to make them upset, but they're kind of asking me to do things that I'm not necessarily comfortable with doing or just don't want to do. So just like last week, how we talked about how you can deal with vague clients before you work together, and then also deal with vague clients after. It's the same thing with scope creep, right? So the best thing you can do with scope creep is to guard yourself as best as possible against it ever happening. We do that with really good proposals and really good contracts. That's why I love doing solid proposals that, just like with the vagueness thing, we're laying out exactly what it is that we are going to do. And we're doing it twice because sometimes clients don't read stuff. So say that you had a conversation about something with a client, you agreed to do 5 things, and they didn't really look at it and they thought you were doing 6. And so then you have this back and forth conversation. Well, we thought that was included. If you have it in a contract, it's really good to cover yourself that way and prevent the client from trying to ask you to do that 6th thing. But if you also have it in proposal and then maybe also in some emails, it helps to protect you even more from the original type of, scope creep, because they can't really push back and say, oh, well, it was my understanding. If you're like, listen, here's the proposal, here's the contract, we clearly never discussed that. So the first thing to do is assume that the client did not realize that they were asking you to do more than you had agreed to do. We don't want to make clients mad. Some clients are trying to push your buttons, or just, they think you're so grateful for the opportunity that you'll do whatever they ask. But we always want to start off with the assumption that they're not doing it on purpose, because you don't want to put your foot in your mouth and be like, how dare you ask me to do extra work? Like, this is what's wrong with the world of freelancing, right? Everybody wants free work. We don't want to do that, especially if it was a miscommunication. What if, the proposal and the contract were viewed and signed by someone else in the company, and this is another person who's been brought in and doesn't really know or understand? So that's one option. People just get confused. And also this happens a lot with employees too. So if you're an employee of a company and you work set hours for a job, you kind of do whatever your employer asks you to do during those hours. And employees who have never worked with freelancers before might not realize that it's not cool to ask us to do extra stuff if we haven't agreed to it, and especially if we also are not being paid for it. So we want to start off with the assumption that they didn't know any better and that it wasn't malicious. And we'll just come back and say, like, hey, I see you now. Let's start with an example of, like, you're writing an article for them, because it's really easy to, like, define what that is. And you put in your proposal, in your contract, the article is 1,000 words. It'll be delivered in 5 days. You have 3 days to submit the revisions to me. And then I have 3 days to get those revisions back to you in the second round. If they come back and they ask for something that's minor, 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. So if they're like, oh, can you also, like, give me a good stock photo to use with that? For me, I have a membership to a stock photo site. I use photos for a lot of my clients. So if I didn't originally quote the client to get the photo, I'm probably not going to make a huge deal about it. If it's something that's more involved than that, like where it's a really quick fix for me to just go grab a photo, I probably am going to say something about it. Like, say they came back and they're like, oh, well, we wanted you to also write a blurb that goes on Twitter, one for LinkedIn, one for Facebook, and also, like, create some text for Pinterest. Well, then that's different than what we originally discussed, because I quoted them for a 1,000 word blog post, So that's what your opportunity to come back and say, hey, I'm glad that, you're wanting to continue the efforts that we're working on together. Social media blurbs are definitely going to help to promote this blog post. However, it wasn't something we originally discussed. So I wanted to make sure that you sent the email to the right person. I always like to ask that, because sometimes maybe they just assumed it was going to be done, but they have, like, a social media person on staff. I'll also ask, if you don't have somebody in your organization who's going to do it and you'd like me to do it, my rate is XYZ, or I don't offer social media, posts or whatever the thing is that they're asking. I don't offer that. Maybe I can make a recommendation for someone who does do that, but that's not something that I specifically handle. So that's where you get to have a say of what it is that you want to do. Because sometimes our clients scope creep in a way where it's not just that they're asking for the thing, but they didn't even come to us and say, hey, are you interested in doing this extra thing? A lot of clients will ask. They'll do the right thing and say, hey, will you post my blog for me? Will you update all my plugins after you finish doing my, website redesign. They'll ask little things. They'll ask if you want to do it. And then that's your chance to come back and say like, oh yeah, that's complimentary, no problem. Or yes, I can, here's an extra fee. Remember that you always have the opportunity to say no to something. You do not have to do anything for any client, especially if it makes you uncomfortable. One of my clients, a longtime client, they're really great to work with, but they've really been asking a lot more out of the writers, and that has been frustrating because we weren't going to be paid anymore. So I brought that up kind of like on behalf of all the other writers, because I'm like, we've been asked to add like 6 things to every article that we submit, which it's not that much extra work, but if I'm doing a couple of articles per week, that does kind of add up to like an hour of my time to do these other extra little things, and we're not being compensated for it. So scope creep can happen, and it can be really mild, and sometimes we want to let it go, right? Because it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal when someone's just asking for one little thing. But if it's an ongoing client and you allow too much niceness, what happens is they'll start asking for more and more. What becomes a minor thing that took you 5 minutes or was $1 from a stock photo site can expand into other things. And you don't want to set that precedent up of, yes, I'll do anything, because if you did your due diligence, you quoted them for something very specific, what it included. And it's assumed that if you didn't list it in your bullet points of what's included, that it's not included, and that that's not something that you're going to do. I also decide this on a case-by-case basis based on how the client is with me, right? So I have one client that I have been working with for 6 years now. He's super easy to work with. He's paid his invoice on time every single month for 6 years. So if he asks me for something little, I'm probably going to go for it, right? If this is a VIP client, if they're paying more than $4,000 a month or more, I'm going to bend a little bit as long as it's not asking too much of me, because that's what I just consider customer service. So that's a judgment call you have to make. Is this good customer service because this person isn't asking for that much more? Or is this going a little too far over what we agreed, and I'm worried about setting a dangerous precedent of, going forward, that I'll take on all of the things. So if you allow one thing and then it starts to become more and more, when it becomes more and more, that's when I would go back and say like, hey, I'm just getting a little concerned that we're deviating from what we kind of originally agreed to do in the contract. And when I signed the contract, I did so with these expectations, and I carved out this much time in my schedule. And it's actually taking more than that, and it's more involved than that because of all these additional asks. So it can be a chance for you to renegotiate that rate. I like to put it to them like, if you want me to do this and I'm willing to do it, here is the cost. If you don't, I recommend someone in your office do it, or you hire another freelancer, right? So I always make those judgment calls on a case-by-case basis. If it's a client that if it's a client that I really like and they hardly ever ask me for anything, right? Like my client that's been with me 6 years, I think we've talked on the phone 3 times over the course of that 6 years. So he's very easy for me to work with. And so if he asks for something just in the name of good business, I'm going to probably make that offer, unless it's like, oh, can we triple the length of our blogs? And, can you post 7 days a week instead? And then we'll have a conversation about that being sort of a different agreement and setup for them. But if it's something little, I'm probably going to do what I can to incorporate that in there. So the best way to prevent scope creep is to clarify literally things that you would not think you would have to clarify in your proposals, in your contracts. Go into detail. You don't want to send them a 15-page proposal, right? But if you're doing something that is bound by length, by time, by depth, anything like that, make sure that that is listed in the contract as far as what the expectations are. A really common pitfall for freelancers is not clarifying revisions, because it can feel to you like it's scope creep if, let's say, the person expected 4 rounds of revision and you didn't specify either way, or you said this statement that I hate. Oh, I'll just keep revising until you're happy. Like one of the freelancers I hired a couple weeks ago put that in her pitch, and I hired her anyways. And then I was like, can you please take that out? Like, just as a fellow freelancer, like I was like, I'm not going to take advantage of that, right? I'm not going to ask you for 8 rounds of revision, but somebody else will, and they'll be much more difficult to work with than me. So if you put something like that in your pitch or in your contract, or if you just said, we'll work through revisions, or you didn't say anything at all, the client's expectation from past relationships might be that it's okay to ask for 8 rounds of revision, or that it's okay for them to sit on it for 3 months and give you no feedback, and then appear in your email inbox out of nowhere saying, hey, we need you to do revisions on this piece. So I like to go above and beyond with clarity to protect myself. Still, if it's a really good client and they just misunderstood something, I'm going to try to make an effort to fix it. I don't want to be super difficult, but I think it's the right thing to do to kind of, clarify at the outset, what have we agreed to do? What are the communication expectations around that? Are we doing phone calls? Do we need a kickoff conversation? Am I supposed to check in with you every day on Skype? Like whatever the expectations are that you've set up. And then also to clarify revisions. Do not forget revisions. You need to say how many times you will revise things. I like to put time limits on it, that revisions are due back in however many days, and that way there's not this problem, especially if you get paid like 50% up front and 50% at the end. It can be hard to like follow up and complete the rest of the project that way, if they're taking a really long time to review revisions. So I like stating that in the contract. So now let's talk about what happens after scope creep is becoming a problem in your existing relationship. Let's go first with if you did not clarify the thing that's in question in the contract. So it's kind of ambiguous about whether this is a big ask from the client's perspective or not, or you didn't say you weren't going to do it, or you didn't put a time limit or a number on it, something like that. Deal with it as far as like, if it's the first time you've worked with a client, you want to set good boundaries, but you don't want to go too far. So sometimes if they're asking for a lot, I'll be like, I'll do this as a one-time courtesy. I actually had this situation last week with one of my clients, and I have this client that's a digital marketing agency. I deliver blogs for their client every single week. And there's always one attorney who's the client of this agency who's just difficult. Like, it does not matter what I write. It does not matter what the editor at the marketing agency thinks. This person is always difficult. And she wrote back something like, I can't use this blog because I don't even know if it's true, right? And I was like, okay, well, here's the resource page that I did. Like, it's true, like it's from a government website, in your state. This is definitely the law, right? Like, I verified that it was accurate. But I didn't want to get into an argument with this particular attorney or make the agency mad. So I told the agency, this one time, as a courtesy, I will write a new topic so that this attorney can have their blog posted as soon as possible. But in the future, I can't really do this back and forth, and I include the resources so they can verify that things are correct, and it's not really a good use of any of our time for that person to be questioning it when they could just easily go click on the link and see that what I wrote is accurate. And it was also weird because I was like, if you're an attorney and in your own state, you don't know what the law is in your specific practice area, that kind of that's not good, right? But I did that just so the marketing agency has been my client for 3 years. They're pretty good about paying on time, and, nobody else has ever had complaints. So I was like, I'm going to just do the right thing to them, even though this one attorney kind of drives me crazy. I'm going to do the right thing for them and just say, you know what? It's easier if I just create something new. We're only talking about 350 words here. Give me a little bit and I can, whip that up. So that's how I choose to handle that. If it's a client that's valuable to you, if there's the potential for future work, that's another thing to consider, but you don't want to bend over too much. So think, when you're in this position, is what they're asking for reasonable? If it is, will doing it set me up in the future for them to walk all over me? Or can I kind of clarify that, this is outside what I normally would do, but since this is the first time we're working together and we didn't clarify it, I'll go ahead and do the extra round of revision. Just know that going forward, we're not going to do, that type of thing. I'm not going to create something new. I'm not going to go through the extra round of revision. I'm not going to wait 6 weeks for your feedback. That way you've at least set up the expectation of, hey, I'm willing to bend this one time in the name of good business and good customer service, but in the future, it's probably not going to be like that. And here's the expectation, so you know what that is. And that's your ding, ding, ding to put whatever that thing is into your contracts and proposals going forward. Sometimes we don't realize that until a client expects it. Like, we have a way of doing business, and we would never assume that 4 rounds of revision is included in anything, or that it's okay to take 3 months to get back to somebody on feedback or whatever. So I think it helps to lay those expectations, even if that mistake has already happened. It's weird what some clients will expect. And so I go in nice first, try to bend a little bit if I can. If they're asking for a bunch of stuff, I'm not going to give them all of it. I'm going to give them part of it and then explain why. When I took on this project, I blocked 10 hours in my schedule to work on it. We're at 9.5 hours now, and what you've requested goes outside of what I said I was going to be able to do and would add 3 more hours. So here's my compromise. Here's what I suggest. And then kind of almost negotiate that with them. That way they know going forward that the language in the contract and the proposals is really important for expectations and everything. I think that really helps to set everybody up on the right page. Now, if they come back again and they're like, I really, really want you to do it, that is when we have a firmer conversation about not agreeing to do that particular thing, especially if it's in the contract that we said we wouldn't do the thing. We line itemed revisions are limited to 2 rounds, or if we never said we were a graphic designer and you're a website designer and they're like, oh, can you also make my logo? And it's well, I didn't think I had to say this, but a free logo is not included with every website, right? So you can be a little bit firmer. With my client that asked me to do graphic design and make a custom PowerPoint, I kind of I went back originally once and said, this isn't only something I never agreed to, it's not even a service that I offer. And they kept pushing it and actually blindsided me on a call. This was another marketing agency with the client. And they were like, oh yeah, so where is the PowerPoint? And I was like, yeah, I don't know, because I never agreed to make one, right? So I had to defend myself very strongly, and then I had to do a lot of reply all. Please see the email below in which I referenced that I wasn't going to be able to create a PowerPoint. Anytime you can reference back to written material to explain why you are or are not doing something, you have a really good case backing you up. Sometimes things can get miscommunicated. Sometimes people interpret things different ways. That totally happens. It happens all the time. But we want to be as clear as we possibly can. So being firm, referencing, as per the contract, here's an email below where we discuss that I wasn't going to be able to do that particular thing. If you note back on the proposal, it says such and such turnaround time for revisions, and we're now beyond that. If someone's slightly over the line for your round of revisions, or you offered 1 round of revisions and there's one small thing that they want you to fix, bend a little bit, right? They should have caught it the first time. Maybe they honestly missed it. So we're always going to go in with the perspective that no one is meaning to up the scope of this project on purpose and that it's happening accidentally. So it's always going to be a little bit of that case-by-case basis, but start with the assumption that no one is trying to screw you over. And then if it kind of keeps feeling like that, that's when we pull in our written evidence if we have it. Oh, please see the contract. The $50 late fee is laid out in the contract. This invoice was paid 3 weeks late, so the $50 late fee applies, right? Contracts and written stuff can save you in so many different situations, and that's why they're so important, because they give us something to fall back on. I had a coaching client recently who had a verbal agreement with somebody to write some landing pages, I think it was, and it was like 3 landing pages, but the client paid, I think it was 50% up front, and then didn't give the feedback on the other landing pages. So once the 2 were submitted, she's like, well, the freelancer was like, well, why am I going to write the 3rd? Because she won't review and pay me for the other 2, even though it's been like weeks that it's been submitted now. So things happen. And then you take that as a learning lesson, like, okay, well, how in the future can I limit this situation from happening? I put in my contracts that they have so long to review. They have so long to post my material. They have so long to run the upgrades on their site, whatever the thing is. That way you're not being held accountable for other people's actions or lack of action, right? So always refer back to written stuff if you can. It will save you in so many situations. It will save you with bad instructions when you can be like, oh, well, here's the email I sent you on July 10th where I asked you to clarify the instructions and you told me to do XYZ, and that's why I did XYZ. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. The other thing I'll sometimes do is play dumb. Like, I don't understand why they're asking me to do that. That's sort of the thread of is this email going to the right person? Like, did you mean to send this to me? I will own the dumb. I will be like, is it possible that I misunderstood something? Because I was sure our agreement was for 3 blog posts and it looks like that's what the contract says. Let me know if I messed something up or if I misunderstood something here. That works better verbally than over email, because that kind of thing can definitely come off snarky over email. But sometimes I will leave the door open that maybe I did understand something. Like, what if I did misunderstand what they were asking for? I don't want to come across as rude, so I want to make it clear, like, is this a case of a miscommunication? Not even funny, but side away from business story, I have a dissertation coach who helps me with every single thing that I write and submit to my university and to my advisor, because in the written form, my advisor and I do not communicate well. I can understand her when we speak in person, when we speak on the phone, but when she puts comments into my documents, it makes me so frustrated because it's like a riddle. I cannot figure out what she's asking or what the purpose of the comment is. So I have to have a third party to help me, like another academic, to go, oh, okay, what she means here is this, because I totally misinterpret it. So in the written form, things can get misinterpreted. And so you want to leave the room for the fact that maybe you did understand something, but always follow that with, my understanding was, my interpretation was. If you've got evidence, put it in there next. So my interpretation was, after our kickoff call on August 1st, that we were going to be doing these 3 things, and then see if they push back and say that it's wrong. These kinds of miscommunications can happen a lot if it's a bigger team or if the people are always changing on the team. I had a client once where the project manager on the program changed 3 times. So it was like starting over every time with this person, and I thought I knew the guidelines, and then it'd be like, well, they'd interpreted them a different way. So if you've got a lot of people on a team, if I had a coaching client once who had a team of people that hated that the company was outsourcing to a freelancer, it's like they took it personally that the company was choosing to do a freelancer rather than use somebody in-house. And so they were like always trying to throw the freelancer under the bus in various phone calls and communication, and it made it kind of difficult to navigate around. So bigger teams, difficult people, people who are just hard to understand in general. You don't really speak the same language. You don't really understand what they're saying. Leave room for the option that you might have misunderstood, and own up to that. Like, I'm sorry if I misunderstood, but here's the evidence that led me to think this particular thing. Now, if we don't have evidence, you have a verbal agreement. First of all, don't ever do verbal agreements. No. Even if with people you trust, do a quick 1-page contract, right? Like, just so we're totally on the same page, have them sign it through HelloSign so they don't even have to print and scan anything, but definitely have something, even for your test projects, right? 1 piece, 1 hour, 1 blog, whatever. quick 1-page contract, just so we're all clear about how payment's going to occur and what it is that they're getting and possibly not getting. So if you only had a verbal agreement, if you misunderstood the agreement, but you don't have anything in writing, if this is a family friend or whatever, we're going to come at it as nicely as possible. Well, actually, I don't do 4 rounds of revision because I can't make that time commitment for every client I'm working with. I say that because sometimes our clients forget that our whole world does not revolve around them. They forget that we're working with other people. And so I like when I can kind of push the blame a little bit to my other clients. Like, because of the commitment I make to all my clients, I can't offer unlimited revisions of my work to anyone because I would potentially be in my office 12 hours a day and it's too much unpredictability for me. I find that 2 rounds of revision is sufficient for 99% of my clients. So that's what I stick to. Or you can make that decision of, this is the case-by-case situation where, this time I'll do the extra round of revision. Going forward, extra rounds of revision are billed at my hourly rate of X dollars or something like that. You know what I mean? So they're clear that you've given them a freebie. In the future, it won't be like this. And when you're almost training your clients, right? You're training them what is acceptable to ask for and what isn't. So they might be like, well, you threw in a picture for free. Like, why is it a big deal for you to do an extra round of revision on a 15-page document or on a website that we were supposed to publish 3 months ago and we didn't? That's when you explain, oh, well, a picture is like, it's really something easy that I can grab quickly, but something that's more involved than that requires hours more of my work means that I'm thrown off of my deadlines for my other projects. So I don't make those kinds of commitments to clients. Especially with the revision thing, telling them what to expect will make them be more diligent about how they ask for revisions. So if they know there's only 2 rounds of revision, then the next time you do a project together, they're going to ask for all their changes in round 1 or round 2. They're not going to be sloppy and be like, oh, well, I've got unlimited revisions here. So here's 5 things I want changed. And the next time, I'll look at the other part of the document. No, we're training them. When we do revisions, and I even tell my clients this too, I said, it is most effective if you ask me to fix every single thing you want at once, because it means I open the document once. I'm already thinking about your project. I'm most likely to go in and correct it all at once. That way we don't have different versions of a document floating around or anything like that. You help train your clients by saying, like, in the future, this is how many rounds of revision you get. In the future, this is what comes when I sell you package X. And if they're asking for bonuses, you can quote them for that. Like, we agreed to 3 blogs with 2 rounds of revision. We agreed to a logo design. However, if you want a whole new logo design or a different color in stage 4 of my process, when I've already turned it into JPEGs and PNGs for you, that's an additional $200 fee because it actually involves me going several steps back in the process to start all over again. So you can add those additional fees on and they can decide if it's important or not. Some clients will push back against you when you try to call them on their scope creeping. They'll be like, well, we have other freelancers on our team. They don't ask for that. Great, that's fine. I don't care about how other freelancers run their business. This is how I run my business. This is my company policy that I don't do 5 rounds of revision, that I don't change logo designs once you've approved the final color, the final font, the final overall design. I don't go back and do it. I don't go back and update your website a year from now because I did the design today, unless you've paid me for a maintenance package. Like, it very clearly tells the clients like what they can and can't get away with. So protect yourself in the proposal, in the contract, protect yourself in emails. If you have a phone call with the client and you further discuss scope, recap the phone call in an email with the bullet points, because all of this becomes such helpful evidence when we go back and say, actually, that's not what we agreed to. That's not what we discussed. Some clients will try to use those verbal discussions as a way to get out of sticking to whatever happened, right? It's very easy to question what happened on a phone call, especially if it was someone else you talked to from the person you're talking to now. So I always like to recap things. I had a client for a while earlier this year that was really difficult, and they would give me instructions and I'd do the work, and then they'd come back and be like, we don't like what you created. And it's like, these are the instructions you gave me. I created exactly what you asked me to do. And they're like, yeah, well, we don't really like those instructions. That's great. That's what you gave me. So I have nothing else to go on. So what I started doing is I would get the instructions. I would verify them on the phone call. And then after the phone call, I would be like, just a quick recap from our discussion today. And I'd include 4 bullet points. You reiterated that the instructions in this document are good to go. You clarified that the tone was sarcastic. You want blah, 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 however many words, right? It might have seemed like overkill to my client, but because I knew they were difficult and because I knew they were scope creepers and they were going to be the type like, oh, we ordered this from you and we just don't like it and like we want it rewritten. No, it was, I mean, they were willing to pay me for my time, but I was still like, this is not a good use of anyone's time to rewrite the same email 5 times because your directions were bad, right? So it was a lot of back and forth for me, but I learned like, I'm going to recap every verbal conversation and I'm going to copy all the people in this project on it. So Samantha can't throw Jessie under the bus, later on and be like, oh, well, Samantha actually doesn't know what she's doing. That happened too, right? So it's just crazy. But written everything is your best friend because it becomes the perfect evidence that's really hard for people to argue with if you can reference it. If they come back and say, that wasn't my understanding. And you can say, it's in the proposal, it's in the contract, it's in this email chain below. I'm not sure where the miscommunication is. That kind of leaves it on them to sort it out. So those would be all of my main things. One thing to remember, you don't have to do anything. Like even if the client is offering to pay you for it and it might be a way to make more money, if it's not something you're confident in doing, if it's not a service you offer, say no. If it's a client you like, consider recommending it to another freelancer or posting in this group and being like, hey, I need such and such for a quick thing for a project. See if people are interested in that. If it's a difficult client, I always ask that you not farm that out to other freelancers unless they really want it. I always tell other people when I'm passing along someone who I think is difficult, like there's a reason I'm letting them go. Can you deal with clients who are nasty on the phone? Just to kind of like prepare them for whatever it is. I usually will not refer out those clients at all. If they ask for referrals, I'll be like, yeah, I don't really know anyone who does this because I don't want to subject any other freelancer to someone who is difficult. But if it's just that it's a service that you don't offer or you don't want to offer, that's where you can pass it on to another person. That's another story from a coaching client that I had last year. She was doing a lot of writing for this company. They also wanted her to do social media. She said, this isn't really something I want to do. I don't want to hire someone on my team specifically to do that. Here's a reference to a social media manager, or you could do this in-house because what I agreed to do is this specific thing. And then my final piece of advice, this is really important. So if you take nothing else away, take this. Do not pitch yourself as a Jack or Jill of all trades unless that is what you want to be. If you pitch yourself as the person who does it all, do not complain when your client tries to scope creep, whether they're trying to pay you or not pay you for that particular service, because clients think they're getting an amazing deal when they hire somebody who's a Jack or Jill or whatever of all trades. They will be like, wow, this person can do everything. This person can run my entire business for me and I only have to hire one freelancer to do it. And we don't want clients thinking that. So unless you truly are the person, like an online business manager is a great example, a VA, a project manager, they do a lot of different things. So they do tend to market themselves as I'm a master of everything. Like I can do all the tech stuff. I can do all the behind the scenes stuff, all the organization. Other freelancers, be wary of using that because if you say that you're the website designer who does all things, you're going to attract clients who want you to do all the things. Same thing with writers, with editors, with everything. And then if you just position yourself too as like a marketing expert, you might attract clients to you who think you can do every aspect of their marketing plan, and you might not want to do that. There's some freelancers who thrive on that. They love doing a variety of things and all kinds of different projects. And then there's other freelancers who are like, my zone of genius is Pinterest. So I don't really want to manage the person's Twitter feed or their LinkedIn feed if I don't have to. So I'd rather just focus on Pinterest, but you want to be careful of how you market yourself, because how you portray yourself to clients will draw those types of clients to you. So if you don't want to do everything, do not say that you can do everything. Don't get on the call and be like, yeah, I can help you with that and that and that. And maybe down the road, and you're thinking like, oh, that'll never come to fruition, or that'll be 6 months from now, because the client might think you can do all of that tomorrow. And those types of clients tend to have completely unrealistic expectations about how long it takes to do things, how long it takes to get results, etc. They'll be like, what do you mean you can't manage all my social media channels and write 6 blogs a week and post everything on my website in the 5 hours that I'm allowing you to do it? Like, some people just, they don't recognize how long things take. So that's one of the best ways to prevent against scope creep. Do not market all the things you can do unless you want to do all those things for that particular client. If you're the type of person who's like, hey, I'm an online business manager, I thrive doing all the things. I'm an executive assistant, I love doing all the things, that's great. But other freelancers who realize they want to focus on a core couple of projects, a core couple of things at a time, be careful how you market yourself. Use the terminology that your clients would use to describe those particular services, so you don't end up offering a bunch of stuff that you don't want to do. It can also spread you really thin and make you feel stressed out, because if you're doing digital marketing here, you're doing content development there, you're managing a YouTube channel over here, you're doing, whatever else with their social media over here, it starts to feel like you're frazzled and you're spread too thin and all over the place. So be aware of that as you go forward with your clients. And next week is the final part of this series, which is about communication boundaries with clients, which is subtle, but so important, how we tell clients how they can talk to us. We often go back into our old employee mindset of, here, you can say whatever you want to me and I'll just, do whatever, and I'll do it at any time and through whatever medium you contact me. And as a business owner, you have to adjust that thinking. So next week, I'll be talking about that, some of the common communication pitfalls, and then how to address them. Okay, bye everyone.